Everyone knows cars that are named after animals: Dodge Viper, Shelby Cobra, Corvette Stingray, even Jaguar itself. But what about cars that are not just inspired by animals, but use the actual natural technology animals have to increase performance and efficiency? This is the art of biomimicry. And this is one of the coolest topics I've ever come across. The scientific definition is long and pretty boring, but in simple terms, biomimicry is reverse engineering natural biological traits or technology to apply that to modern day technology to optimize design or solve problems. Or, in even simpler terms, taking some trait an animal has and designing something that replicates that trait. Hope that makes sense. And this isn't some fugazi pseudoscience thing. Some of the best car designers in the world utilize biomimicry, like legendary car designer Frank Stephenson, who used this while designing the McLaren P1, which we're going to cover in depth later in the video. And he describes it pretty well. He says, quote, "Nature has had millions of years to evolve its designs. It just simply makes sense. How can a lizard go upside down and stick to the surface? Well, if you can find out why, you can just apply that technology to the tires of cars such that when surfaces are wet, there's no way that the car can slide." So that's the overall idea: taking something from nature, putting it into technology. To add on to what Frank said, all of these traits that animals have been optimized through natural selection over millions of years of trial and error, or were put here by intelligent design. That's not a conversation for right now. But these designs have very few weaknesses and can work in almost any environment, meaning only the best and most beneficial traits are kept around to ensure survival. And biomimicry isn't new. It's been around for a long time, but finally more brands are starting to pay closer attention to this and take it more seriously. And this could be one of the biggest evolutions ever in automotive design. So, how does it actually work? Getting from something that occurs in nature to then being able to put it in modern technology. It's actually pretty simple, but a lot easier said than done, as with most things in life. Step one, define the problem. What are we trying to solve? What problem do we have? Step two, research. Where in nature does some animal have something that solves this problem? Step three, why? Why does this solve the problem? Find the principal reason of why this natural technology actually solves the problem. Step four, translation. Put the principal reason into engineering language and develop specs for an original design. Step five, prototype. Build a physical prototype, test it, and iterate the design. Step six, optimization. Refine the design for manufacturing. Step seven, implementation. Produce it and apply it to solve the problem at a massive scale. And that's how it works. Not super complicated. And for a little bit of background, most biomimicry in the automotive space is done on a very small scale, like we explained earlier with the tires. One of the best and worst examples, I'll explain why it's both in a minute, just hang on with me for a second, is the prototype car, the Mercedes-Benz Bionic, which was originally inspired by the yellow boxfish. And at first glance, the boxfish seems like a terrible animal to model a car after unless you were designing a Sprinter van. Previous to this car being showcased, the yellow boxfish was presumed to be incredibly hydrodynamic, which is essentially just aerodynamics in water, which gave it super low drag and the ability to travel long distances using very little energy, which when put into car terms would be incredible for fuel consumption and gas mileage. And as the yellow boxfish was able to travel long distances and use very little energy, the team at Mercedes got the reason why completely wrong, like dead wrong. The yellow boxfish is one of the least hydrodynamic fish in the world, like super below average. So, in theory, this would actually be a terrible fish to model something after. And for the nerds out there like me, the real reason why it was able to use such little energy was these tiny fins that made small adjustments to keep the fish going straight whenever it got knocked off its path. Kind of like how SpaceX rockets will use small cold gas thrusters to make microscopic adjustments while landing back on Earth. So this fish is pretty advanced regardless of the fact that the Mercedes team got the reason wrong. But back to the car. Unbeknownst to the team at Mercedes, they took the principles from the boxfish, iterated the design, and created the Bionic car, which actually served its purpose incredibly well with a drag coefficient of 0.19. It got 70 miles per gallon and did 700 miles on a full tank. For reference, the lowest drag coefficient of any car out at the time in 2005 when this showcased was the Toyota Prius at 0.26. So it was marginally lower than the already most aerodynamic car out there. So even though the engineers were misled and got the principle of why the fish was so energy efficient, by studying the fish, whose species has survived for tens of millions of years and evolved, they built a car that became and still is to this day one of the most aerodynamic cars of all time. And no one's really talked about this part. This is a pretty niche topic to begin with. But I believe that the reason that this actually worked, even though they were wrong about the fish, is that compared to other cars on the road that we built using human technology, even by utilizing natural technology when it's not even perfected, can still bring massive advancements in the space. Which I don't know about you guys. I love nature. I think this is super cool. And the fact that we still have so much to learn from nature means the sky is truly the limit for our technology, especially in the automotive space. But we've obviously used biomimicry on more than just one car. So these are some other examples that show just how wide of a range this practice can actually apply to in the car world. And this first one is a perfect example of that because it's not something physical, and this will make sense in a second. Nissan wanted to optimize their forward warning collision system, which are those lights and beeping and automatic braking that happens when you don't brake early enough and the car starts yelling at you and barking at you. I'm not a big fan of that technology, but how they optimized it is cool regardless. So, where did they look? Schools of fish. Why? Because fish, when swimming in schools, remain very close to each other without making contact, which makes sense for why they'd look to that. So they reverse engineered this idea to implement into software in the cars, which helps with the forward warning collision system, auto braking features, and in the future, autonomous cars. Another example are lotus leaves, not the car brand Lotus, but the lotus plant itself. The lotus plant's leaves are incredibly hydrophobic, meaning they repel water. So, using this principle, engineers designed ceramic coating, which causes the water to beat up and roll off the car, which I'm sure you've seen videos of and is super satisfying. Going back to the tire example, Michelin found that geckos, grasshoppers, and frogs were all very good at clinging on to things in wet conditions, which would be very beneficial for tires. However, the gecko's natural technology doesn't really work at scale, mostly because I think it's like these small hairs that kind of grab onto things, so they would just get dirt and break. But the frogs and grasshoppers both had a flat surface that somehow stuck to things in wet conditions. So they reverse engineered that technology to create tires that will work in rainy and wet conditions. Pretty cool. Next up, electric battery cells, which in general, I have no idea how they work. They're incredibly complex, but nature finds a way. So companies that build these batteries work with slime mold, which I'll throw up a video here. And if you haven't seen slime mold work before, they find the most efficient path through a maze, which I don't know how the science behind this actually works, but they use these to help find the most optimized path through the battery itself. And we often forget that we humans are animals as well. And one car actually uses a human inspired design. Well, it's not entirely unique to humans, but it's still cool. Lamborghini and MIT did a collaboration and came together to make the Lamborghini Terzo Millennio, which has self-healing carbon fiber, which, like human skin, can regenerate when it's cut or damaged. They did this by using what they called, quote, nanotubes, which are like blood vessels or vascular networks that fill the crack in the carbon with resin when it's damaged, repairing the carbon and preventing further damage, just like our skin does. This is pretty next level stuff. Whenever somebody uses the word nano, I just think future nanobots, big hero 6 type stuff. But the level that we can take biomimicry to in the automotive space is pretty cool. But when it comes to biomimicry, the king is the McLaren P1 and its designer, Frank Stephenson. And the story of how he used biomimicry in this car is pretty cool because it uses two different animals: the cheetah, which is the fastest animal on land, and the swordfish, which is debatably the fastest animal in the sea. Those two are pretty fitting for a hypercar. The look, stance, and aerodynamics of the car evolved from the cheetah. And Frank obviously explains it much better than I can, saying the cheetah is a strikingly efficient animal when it's at full speed. So trying to capture that dynamic proportion of it in certain element. And as you can see here in this sketch drawn by Frank, he took design inspiration from the cheetah to give the P1 its signature curves, style, looks, and proportions. Cool story. But the cooler story is the swordfish, which plays a lot less obvious role on the car, but I'll let Frank tell it.
A few years ago, so I was in the Caribbean, and I noticed one at the place where I was staying. It was on the wall. And so I questioned the man who'd actually caught it, who was working there at the resort. He said he was very proud that he was actually able to catch it because they're so fast and so maneuverable. I went into a few days of research on the actual sailfish itself to see why it was so quick. I learned a few things about it that really opened my eyes up in terms of hydrodynamic efficiency, which is very similar to aerodynamics. And so on the way back to Heathrow, we stopped off in Miami, and I went down to the fishing village very close, and was able to buy an actual sailfish that had just been caught. And I had it sent down to downtown Miami. We had it stuffed and then sent back to London. And then we sent it down to the scanning department of our dynamics lab. And we discovered that the actual scales of the sailfish, or the faster the sailfish goes, tend to generate little vortexes and pockets of air, such that at a certain speed, the sailfish is actually not even going through the water. It's actually enveloped in a pocket of air. Then there's an added benefit of physics or hydrodynamics also that actually creates a suction where the fish is actually going faster. So what we were able to do was normal ducting that leads into the passageways towards the engine, where the sort of the lungs of the car are normally just smooth, or maybe with just a little bit of texture. But by applying the same scales of the sailfish, that type of form, to the inside of the ducting, we were able to increase the amount of air going into the engine by another 17%. Not only that, there are a few other elements on the sailfish: the fins, the trailing edge of the fins, little diblets which are on the part of the body where the torso, where it meets the tail fin, uh, to straighten out the flow of pockets of air, or the water as it goes past. A lot of things. So we basically had the fish immortalized and put up on the wall. The design studio was a huge attraction for us every day to look at it and study it and get inspiration from it.
It doesn't get much cooler than that. A personal anecdote that he then carried to one of the best cars of all time. And he has a series on YouTube at Frank Stephenson where he goes over the entire design process of the McLaren P1. If I can figure out the tech side, I will try and tag him in the comments. If not, check him out at Frank Stephenson. And who knows where the future of biomimicry in the automotive space will take us, but with people like Frank in the game, it can take us far. Whether it's for aesthetics, performance, efficiency, I think this practice is insanely cool. This is one of the most fun times I've ever had researching a video and making a video. And if you've stuck around this long, thank you so much. See you in the next one. Subscribe.